And in TV, because it's such a short time period, you have to kind of interlace your stories and have them kind of connect with each other. So for me, I'll have like the main story, which is the mystery, but the subplot is dealing with her family. And because her sister is the one who was killed, it kind of interweaves. And then also she kind of has like this kind of slow burning romance going on with this journalist. And so that's also connected to the main story because he's actually covering her sister's death. So it's always cool to kind of be able to like interweave them and have them all kind of connected. It makes it easier.
Yeah, awesome. Okay, so let's go to Bernadette, also goes by the pseudonym B.A. Paris, and her latest book is The Therapist, in stores now. Tell us about yourself and tell us about The Therapist. And let me be the first to say, I was not expecting that ending at all, even though it made perfect sense. Go ahead.
That's great. So yes, I'm B.A. Paris, and I'm probably best known for Behind Closed Doors, which was my debut novel, which came out 5 years ago, I think. So I'm a relatively new author. I started writing very late in life, so there's hope for everybody out there that still wants to be a writer. So The Therapist is my latest book. It came out 2 weeks ago, and it tells the story of Alice and Leo, who move into a gated community in London. And they haven't been there very long when Alice discovers a grisly secret about the house she lives in. And she sets about trying to find the truth behind what's happened, because none of her neighbours really seem to be talking about it. And she's got the feeling that nobody is actually telling the truth.
And I won't give any spoilers, but it is very twisty. From your experience writing psychological suspense, what elements are essential for a mystery thriller?
I think pacing is really important. I think you have to keep the reader. I love it when readers say to me, I wanted to put the book down, just one more chapter, and then I'll go to sleep. But they have to keep on reading. So I think pacing is really important because you want to just grab their attention at the beginning and keep it going. And I also think twists are important. You can't have a thriller really without some twists in it. And I really love trying to not outfox the reader, but actually just make it surprising for them. As you said, you didn't see the ending coming, and you probably read a lot of psychological thrillers. So that's great feedback for me that, there is, even if people do guess a couple of the twists, there's one twist that probably not many people have got, I think. And I think that's important for the reader because it just, I think they like to feel they haven't guessed everything and they can be surprised.
Yeah. Someone in the comments says, get it ASAP. I don't know if they're talking about The Therapist, but if you are, definitely get it ASAP. So now let's talk ice cream. Abby Collette, yes, great topic. You have written a delicious, cozy series, The Ice Cream Parlor Mysteries. And like most of your books, at its heart is a murder mystery, but it has those elements of humor and the small town charm that really epitomize a cozy story, one that made me very hungry reading. Can you tell us a little bit about yourself, about Game of Clones? And for those who may not know, can you explain what exactly is a cozy mystery?
Yes, I run into that question a lot. What exactly is a cozy mystery? So I'm a former lawyer and I'm an economics professor. And, I found that it was better to write about murder than to defend murderers. So I started writing. Actually, I got sick. And so I had to just chill out for a little while. And I started writing and I thought, what's better than this? And I started out writing Dan Brownish kind of books, and I'm just not a person for the violence and peril around every corner. And I found cozy, because cozies, just think Jessica Fletcher and Murder, She Wrote. It's always an amateur sleuth who solves the mystery. It's in a quaint little town where everyone knows each other because, of course, you rely on gossip and, to solve the mystery. And everything happens off stage. And it's, if you can say this, it's a light murder. It's my ex-husband says it's fluff, but when death is involved, it's not too fluffy. And I'm a hybrid author. I started out writing self-published books just because I was recuperating and I had nothing to do. Never thought about being traditionally published, and I just wrote whatever I wanted to write. I always said, who knew there were rules to writing? And then I got an agent, and so getting the ice cream story isn't my idea. I can't take that credit, but I loved telling the story. And I actually took my grandchildren, I have 4 grandchildren, to get ice cream in Chagrin Falls. We have 2 ice cream shops. And it's actually in my book. There is a shop. There is a waterfall that bisects the city, and there is actually a store there. It's a popcorn store that sells ice cream. And I thought, oh, this is just a great place to kill someone.
That's the first thing you thought.
Yeah, it's like, and then everyone was so nice and talking to me. And I thought, this is exactly, the setting, because setting is a big part of Cozy Mysteries. So I thought this is the perfect setting. So that's how that came to be.
Yeah, well, for those who don't know, there are recipes in your book, and I've been dying to make one. I feel like it's not going to turn out great, but I did, after reading your book, go to Haagen-Dazs. That's all I'll say. And last but certainly never least, I loved Local Woman Missing so much. Firstly, that title is fantastic.
Yeah.
Mary, please, can you give us an introduction to yourself and tell us a little bit about your book?
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you for having me here first. I'm just so excited to be here and to chat with all of you. I'm a former high school history teacher turned author. I've been writing, for fun for most of my life, but I've been doing it professionally for probably the last 10 years or so. Local Woman Missing is my 7th book out, and it's set in the suburbs of Chicago, in a suburban community where over the course of just a couple of weeks, 2 women and a young girl all go missing. And there's an investigation into their disappearances, but the police uncover a few things, but ultimately the investigation goes cold, and it's kind of closed until 11 years later, when the little girl who was 6 years old when she disappeared, she's now 17, suddenly returns, and everybody wants to know where she's been all this time and where are the others.
Yeah. Okay. So local 24 hours. I stayed up for 24 hours. And that's how fast paced it was. I couldn't go to sleep the next morning. I regretted everything because I was exhausted. But it's just one of those books that keeps you guessing until the very end. It's almost like 2 stories being woven together to create that explosive finale. And what I love was how each chapter really relied on one another so fantastically. And I have to ask, what do you write first, the beginning or the ending?
Oh, well, thank you so much for all those wonderful things you said about Local Woman Missing. So all of my books, I write from multiple narrators' points of view. And in Local Woman Missing, there are 4. So the answer is it's not, I actually write one of the narrators at a time. So I start essentially at the beginning, but I write one of the narrators in their entirety all the way through to the end. And then I pop back and I pick up another narrator and I write his or her perspective from beginning to end. And I do that for all of my narrators. And then I take my document to FedEx and I print them all out. And I, have my stacks of paper and I kind of start shuffling them together in a way that makes sense for the story. It always relies on like heavy edits at the end to make sure that I'm not revealing something too soon or that everything makes sense. And it usually takes some tweaks at the beginning of chapters to kind of place the reader back to where they were a little bit so that hopefully it doesn't confuse the reader. But for me, I love my characters so much. And I think the characters are such a vital part of the story. So for me to be able to write one of these narrators at a time, I just feel like I can sort of lose myself in that person's story instead of jumping back and forth between narrators.
That is so unique. I've never heard of that before. It sounds really complicated, but clearly it works very well. So that was great. Now that you've had a chance to introduce yourself in your book, we're going to do a quick intermission while Helen takes over and gets to those juicy, hard-hitting questions. So let's see.
Hi, everyone. Can you hear me okay?
Yes.
All right. We have seamlessly done that transition. I'll say as book people, we were nervous about the tech. So this is great. I'm so happy to be here. So to say it again, I'm Helen O'Hare. I'm an editor at Mulholland Books, which is the crime fiction imprint of the Little Brown and Company at Hachette. And I think like many people here, I love, twisty thrillers, atmospheric mysteries. I love a messy family story and any novel with a murder at its heart. So I have the honor of working with Kellye, as Kellye said, but I have been a big fan of all of your books over the past few years. And you all have had really interesting career paths over your past few books in the past, 5 to 10 years as well. So, and I love, we were chatting a bit before this started, but I just love the range of kinds of mysteries that you guys write. We were saying, some are a bit darker and maybe a bit is light. Some are very dark. Some are very funny. Some are really entertaining. So I love how much variation there can be in the crime imprint. But because this is a women in crime fiction panel, I do just want to kick us off talking about crime fiction in general, and particularly then the role of women in the genre. So I'm curious to hear from each of you, what you see as the purpose of crime fiction, why you choose to write in this genre, and then how you see your role as a woman or as a creator of female characters fitting into the crime genre overall. So I think it'll be easiest if I kick this off to one person in particular, and then I would love for you all to join in. So I'm gonna pick on Kellye because she's my author. So Kellye,
I'm always first.
Go first again. I'd love to hear you just talk about, what do you see as the purpose of crime fiction? Why do you write in the genre, and what role do women play?
I think for me, I think you want to have an ending to me that's satisfying, and like the bad guy gets caught. To me, especially in real life, it doesn't always happen. And so that's what I love about crime fiction, or at least most of it, that I'm going to read it and I know by the end of 300 pages that the bad guy is hopefully going to get what they deserve. So I think that's what I love about it. I think that women don't get the credit that they are due. I think that's why organizations like Sisters of Crime were created in the 80s by like Sarah Paretsky. I think people tend to think of crime, they think of, well, not people, but certain segments that it's like, big strong men coming in and killing everyone with one gun, and even like Abby was talking about cozies earlier, because my date books are lighter. To me, it's harder to make murder funny than it is to walk in and write a scene where some like macho man comes in and shoots everybody with one gun, then has sex with the leading lady, and so I think that to me, for women, like, we don't get enough credit, but we tend to make murder more, I'm not going to say interesting, but more emotional, which I think is important. So.
Yeah, I like that. So when I did earlier, I did say ex-husband. So this is something my ex-husband said. He said, men react on logic and women react on emotion. So don't hate him so much. We're products of the 50s. But, I think that women they do encompass both, like Kellye said, so we're logical and we can do that crime fiction where we can, lay down the clues and put those chapters together, rearrange them so to keep you hanging on. But we also can bring out that emotion in a story to keep you turning the pages, to captivate you. So I think that we are uniquely suited to do crime fiction. And for me, I've always loved just mystery. Mystery is just the intrigue of it, and to not know what's going on and to be able to figure it out. And crime just kind of follows with that, a little murder or theft or whatever. Recently, I wrote a women's fiction book that will come out. It's called Where Wild Peaches Grow. It comes out in August 2020. And I had the hardest time not killing someone. It was just like so natural. And my agent was like, please, can we not have a murder in this one? And I struggled writing it. And I thought, what do you do if you don't kill someone? What is the story about? So for me, I think it's just like an innate thing. I'm an ID channel girl and forensic files. And it's just the way I think. I don't know if that's a good thing or a bad thing. But for me,
it's gotten you this far.
Yeah, it's just part of me. So.
I feel like I'm very similar to Abby about how I got into this. I feel like into this genre, like I was always, it's just kind of what I gravitate towards when I'm reading a book or when I'm watching TV or going to a movie. I just love that suspense and the crime fiction. Before I started writing my first book, The Good Girl, I kind of dabbled in more women's fiction. I would say it didn't have the crime, the murder, and all that. And I would get partway into my manuscripts and then just lose interest. And something was missing and I couldn't figure out what it was. And it was totally by accident that I worked these like twisty, suspenseful elements into The Good Girl. And I thought I was writing a love story, 100%. You know, I didn't know that someone was going to die and all these bad things were going to happen. But once I started adding that into my manuscript, I knew right away that that was what was missing, and that this was the genre that I really belonged to write in. And I agree totally with Abby and Kellye about just that emotion that I think women writers bring to this genre. I say all the time just how important character is and character development is in this kind of book, because as writers, we want our readers to be 100% invested in these characters, because I think that that's what keeps them. The suspense does, of course, but the characters and their relationship with the characters is what keeps them so totally involved. And I think that women writers just do that in a very unique way. And these characters, I write many male characters too, but many of my characters are women. They're mothers, they're friends, they're wives. And I think that as female readers, we really relate to these characters, and they're not always the victim. You know, they can be the heroine as well.
Yeah, it was a little bit like that for me too, your experience. I mean, I never set out to write psychological fiction at all, thrillers at all. Before I was published, I was writing just family dramas for myself, really. And then I started to try and get published, and I just kept getting rejections. And one agent said to me, you know, don't give up, but what you're writing isn't right for the market. And I said, well, what is right for the market? And they said psychological thrillers. And I had really no idea what that genre was. And I remember saying, I will never, ever write a thriller, a psychological thriller. It's just not something I want to do. And the next book I wrote was Behind Closed Doors. But for me, that was just, I didn't think about the genre at all. For me, it was another family drama. And of course, then it was picked up and everybody said, this is a great psychological thriller. And I thought, I can't believe I've ended up writing psychological thrillers, because once you write one, that's what people want.
Yeah.
And so I kind of fell into it by accident, but it is something I really do enjoy writing, because I do love thinking up those twists. I love thinking of, you know, what I can do to make it more interesting. And for me, it's a bit like a mathematical puzzle. You know the end. I start with my beginning and I know the ending, and I don't know anything. I don't know how you do it, Mary, to write from 4 perspectives and write. I just think that's amazing. It sounds like so much work, whereas I just have my beginning and then I just kind of get to the end. But I let the characters lead me there, really. I don't really have a great idea of what's going to happen, maybe a couple of waypoints. So yeah, it's really interesting, the different things. But you know, when people talk about the role of what our role, I think it's just to really entertain, isn't it? I mean, you just want people to, why do people pick up a book? Because they want to be entertained, really. I mean, fiction. So yeah, I think the role of, I don't know whether it's any different from the role of male writers, really.
Yeah, I love that answer. And I love being entertained. Thank you all for writing books that keep us so entertained. I'm interested. I also just love this idea that you set out to write, you know, a family story or relationship stories, and they just happen to involve murder. Like, this is the way that, you know, families and relationships go. But I'm so grateful that you know, your story led you there, and Mary, that your love story took the turn that it did. That's, I don't think I fully understood that's where you'd started, but it is an interesting question. I think maybe just to go a bit further with this sort of idea of writing as a woman, writing about women, writing potentially for women, although I hope that all kinds of readers are reading each of your books. But it has been a really interesting, I mean, obviously, you know, decade after decade, it's been an interesting time and a changing time for women in our culture. But even in the past 10 years, we've had, you know, the Me Too reckoning. I would say in the past, since COVID hit, we've had this people talking a lot about the power balance for women working at home with children and sort of big questions. And it feels like these sort of women's questions are taking a forefront in our conversations. And I'm interested if that has had any effect on the way you're writing these books. I mean, maybe particularly those of you writing domestic suspense books that are set like in this traditional women's sphere. Do you feel like you are affected by some of these cultural trends while you're writing, or do you really feel like your stories are sort of, or maybe, yeah, do you not? Do you feel like your stories are coming from some other current or impulse or interest? So maybe I'll kick this over to Mary to start this one off.
Yeah, you know, I do. I mean, I feel like, because like I was saying before, many of my characters are predominantly women. I feel like I always have a couple female narrators. I do have male narrators sometimes as well, but I feel like it's more predominantly women. And so I'm telling women's stories, you know, today, and just some of the struggles that we as women deal with. In Local and Missing in particular, one of my narrators is a doula. And so I was able to do a significant amount of research and just really get into the life of a doula. And I uncovered just a great deal of research about some abuse that goes on in childbirth practices within the medical community. And it was really surprising and eye-opening to me. And so that was something that I was able to work into the book. And I can't tell you the number of women that have reached out to me after the book has come out and said, you know, that they have had similar experiences, and just kind of thanking me for raising awareness, you know, for that this happens to women, because it's something that many people don't talk about. So I do think it is a great opportunity when the situation is right to get into some of these topics that maybe we don't talk about as much as, or that we're just really starting to be more open to talking about over the last number of years.
Yeah, I was really fascinated. I think my eyes were open. I thought I sort of understood about the, you know, a lot of things about, I have not had children myself yet, but this world of what women go through and the sort of expectations and the medical mistreatment that can happen. And your book just, I mean, my eyes were really opened, and it was incredible how both moving and suspenseful that storyline was. So I was really, it felt like, you know, a really powerful time to explore that experience.
Yeah, absolutely.
I think it's back to, you know, write what you know. Being a woman is just what I know. You know, I know the things that it takes. So, you know, and it's always been a part of my thought process. Like if I went for a job interview, I always thought, will I get this? You know, it was the two things that popped in my head: because I'm Black and because I'm a woman, you know, will these things happen for me? And I think all of these just went into my experience and, you know, made me the person that I am. And I find, actually other people find, my readers find, that I write mostly about myself and my experiences. And I didn't realize that until people brought it to my attention. Oh, you always write about family. Oh, you always write about, you know, an educated woman, a Black woman. And it's because those are my experiences. So I think, even though I try to go outside of what you know, you shouldn't necessarily write what you like unless you know what you write, you know. So it's write what you know, but know what you write. And so I try sometimes to go out of that box. I think that I still, the core of my stories are what I know. It's just, you know, my circle and how I feel about things. I always do a lot of research and find out other aspects to make the story, you know, on a grander scale. But it's just, I think it's me, and I don't profess to know how men think, although, you know, sometimes I think, oh, I know what he'll say or what he'll do. But I know what a woman will do, you know, in my experiences. And it just comes naturally. And I think that's the best way to make a good story, is to make it familiar and authentic, is to write from inside of yourself.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So I can't really answer this question about whether I'm writing differently now than I was at the beginning, because it's only 5 years for me, really. So, but one thing I have noticed is that because of everything that's happened, I need to make my characters, my female characters, they tend to be a bit, at the beginning of my stories, quite naive. And then by the end, of course, they're on top and they're winning, and they're, because I think that's the way I've perceived, because maybe that's where I was brought up, that is, you know, women are, it's kind of, well, my characters tend to be very naive, and I think that's probably my experience, because I grew up in quite a very religious family, and then went to boarding school, a Catholic school, and a convent, not a boarding school. And so and then, you know, you really had to struggle to get away from that kind of role model that you were given of perhaps being a nun or whatever. And so I think that shows in my books, but I've noticed that a lot of people say, oh gosh, your characters, you know, they're so annoying at the beginning because they're just quite passive. And so that's one thing that I've noticed in my writing, that my next character, my next book, she's really feisty. And I think that's, you know, this is what women now want to see, feisty characters. They don't want these passive women as kind of, you know, role models. So Yeah, so that's how it's changed for me. And I think, yeah, I'm just coming up into the 21st century, making my women a lot more feisty than I think they were before. So, especially as a lot of young women are reading these books, and so they wouldn't have, it's different now.
Mm-hmm.
Definitely different.
Right.
I think for me, I don't write about just women. I write about Black women, which I think is a completely different beast. I think that especially in the domestic suspense genre, there's not enough. And I think there's certain reasons because Black women are going to be treated differently in certain situations, like if they're with their husband or with their child being missing. And so the idea for like a sister came from a headline that I read that said it was about a pregnant reality star who was found dead in the Bronx. And the headline was the Daily News, and it said, Lyric McHenry, pregnant reality star, found dead in the Bronx with cocaine and no pants, which is such a disrespectful headline that they would never do for a Kardashian or anyone. But because this was a Black woman, they felt that they could do a disrespectful headline. And so I kind of talk about that in the first chapter of the book, but also so even though my books aren't about being a Black woman, they are about Black women, so I kind of also touch on the idea of the angry Black woman, which people try to put on us as Black women, but also the strong Black woman that we put on ourselves, because I don't think people, like we think about like Simone Biles, and like she just had mentioned she had a mental breakdown basically. People are like, how dare you not, do flips for your country, and they're not going to do that the same way for honestly like a beautiful blonde woman, and so people are so tough on Black women. And so I want to kind of talk about that a little bit in the book. So even though it's not a book about being Black, it's a book about Black women, and kind of it'd be hard not to write a book about that without covering that topic. So
right, because that's what you know. So
that's what I know.
Yeah, and it's an experience, I think America is finally, in the past 2 years, Kellye and I have talked a bit about this, about changes in the publishing industry, but really, getting people to understand and read a wide range of voices and experiences. And I think one of the things that interests me in the crime genre, and one of the reasons, this is where my career as an editor has taken me, is just questions of justice in society, which I think books about women, crime novels about women are often exploring this as well. But what does it mean to have justice in society? And what does it, what happens when a crime is committed? How is it treated differently for different people in different places and different kinds of society? What are the power structures? And I think that, those things are, only come to life in these novels when they're written with that kind of emotion and investment that, as we were talking about, I think female writers tend to have a lot of that. That tends to be the way that we're thinking about these characters. And certainly, as a reader and an editor, what I'm often looking for is to be, in some ways, challenged. I mean, I want to be entertained. Always something. Don't ever stop doing that. But I think there is something about what really about what you would do in a situation, and what would you do if your boundaries are pushed. And I think even on the lighter end, thinking about what would I do in my in a cozy, what do you do when you're in a situation, all the people around you, you have to figure out who to trust and what sense to make of the things that are happening. So I love those questions. And I think for me, that's where the sort of a more emotional aspect of, to gender stereotype, and we know these are sort of broad generalizations, but this idea of sort of emotionally driven writing and stories that are driven by a character's experience more so than they are, say, the violence or the sort of more classic thriller lines that we've seen. So I'm interested. So because we've all talked a bit about writing these more emotional characters, or writing what or writing characters that are close to your heart, I'd love to hear you guys talk a bit about sort of favorite either characters or voices you've written, or maybe voices or characters that you have had a harder time with, or maybe even been scared of. I don't know if you guys have ever written a character that, by trying to be in their head, really challenged you. And this could go for, your most recent book, but, across your writing career. I'm really curious. So maybe I'll go over to Abby for this one, just to kick us off, and then feel free to, talk amongst yourselves.
Well, I don't think that I have a hard time writing characters, because I let characters write themselves. I let them do what they want. I don't fight it. Oh, you want to say this? You want to go here? And for example, in my book, Bronwyn Cruz is the main character. We call her Win. And when I started the story, I made this guy, his nickname is O, that they were going to eventually get together, slow burn kind of thing over the course of the books. And she just did not like him, even though I decided that was going to be her man. She was like, I do not like him. Everyone in the story was like, he likes you. Why don't you go out with him? But every time I tried to type, and they went out to dinner, or he called her on the phone, it was like, ooh, and delete the delete. So I don't have a problem with characters because whatever they want to do, okay, I'm happy. And then I think my favorite characters. So another thing about my life is, so my mother, I was what they call a midlife baby. My mother was in her mid 40s when she had me. And by the time I was 10 and understood age, she was 55. And I thought, oh my God, that's ancient. She's going to die any minute, you know? And so I have this thing for old people because in my mind, my mother was always old. And in every book, I have an old person in my books. And I don't care what I write. It's like an elderly person there. And so I have snatched my mother, bits and pieces of my mother's personality, and I put them in all my books, I think. For like my first self-published cozy mystery, there's a Miss Vivi, and part of her is my mother. And then in my first traditionally published Secrets, Lies, and Crawfish Pies, that's my Romaine Wilder, there's an Auntie Zane, and that's my mother. And then in my ice cream book, even though she's dead and my mother's dead, there's a Grandma Kay, and that's my mother. So those are my favorite characters because this way, you know, my mother's always in my heart and in my mind. I talk about her every day as if she was here, and she's been gone more than 20 years. But, you know, I get to share her with everyone else too. So those are always my favorite characters, right? And I always try to figure out, how can I get an old lady into this, you know, into this book?
That's beautiful, Abby. You're making me tear up over here.
I was just thinking that.
I feel like there's always a period of time that it takes me to get to know my characters. So they can be a little quiet and difficult at the beginning, but there's always this point where they just like click, and I know this character, and you know, they're just, I know what they would do or what they would say, and they do. I mean, there's a certain point where they just kind of write the story for me. But so getting to know them sometimes takes time, but once I get to know them, then it really just flows. And that's a part of the writing process that I love, when I really feel that connection with my characters, and the writing just flows that much easier. It seems like in each of my books, there is one character that I do love the most. And usually it's like the underdog that you don't really expect a whole lot from at the beginning of the book, but by the end of the book, they just kind of triumph. You know, I don't know, I just feel so emotionally connected to them. And in Look Who Went Missing, it's this boy named Leo, and he's the little brother of the girl that goes missing, Delilah. So his narrative takes place 11 years later in the present, when Delilah comes back home. She's 17, he's 15, and he actually feels pretty resentful in a way that she's home, because his whole life has kind of been about her. You know, he's the boy with the missing sister, and that's what everything has always been about. And so he and his father had kind of like, they had just begun to move on and kind of to rebuild without her and her mother, but then suddenly she reappears and everything is about her again. So he has feelings about this. And, you know, I think that for most readers, when they meet Leo the first time, they're kind of like, you know, come on, kid, this isn't about you. Your sister's back after all this time. And then, you know, you just kind of start to get to know Leo, and Leo starts to reconnect with his sister, and you start to appreciate him in a totally different way. And his narrative is all told in second person, which I've never done before. But so it kind of reads, he's talking to her, his sister, this whole time. So it reads as kind of a very personal letter story between the two of them. And so he was one that I just loved writing. And when his story was all said and done, I just adored him.
And can I ask you just, what was the first voice you wrote for Look Who Went Missing?
Yeah, so I wrote Delilah first. There's just like 40 pages of like an early chapter at the beginning that's from Delilah's perspective, and that was, I just kind of heard her voice. It was when I started to put together the ideas for the story, and I just kind of heard her, and you know, I knew that I had to write this, and I sat down and I wrote that section first.
I'm not totally surprised, but I'm always curious. Her section, I mean, I think I picked it up with a few minutes to spare one time, thinking I'd get into it later, and then I just, you know, her section, I couldn't look away. Interesting, though. Leo, I had that feeling. I was a come on kid at first, but I turned around.
I felt very sorry for him when I read the book, because I could imagine, you know, his whole life being overshadowed by his sister, his missing sister. So yeah, you do feel a lot of empathy for him.
Thank
you. But I think for me, the most interesting character I wrote was Jack in Behind Closed Doors. It was just incredible because he really did take over the story. I had no intention of writing a book that was so dark. For me, it was just about a marriage that had gone wrong. But, you know, it was as if he was there going, I've got to be much more evil than this. Come on, you know, if you want to grab people's attention. And the way I write is I write one day, the next day I always read over what I wrote the day before and kind of edit, and then I'll go on to write. And, you know, I would read over what I'd written the day before, wouldn't remember. And I think, how could I have written this? Where did this come from? But I really felt that Jack kind of possessed me while I was writing that book. It was incredible. As I say, I never intended to write anything like Behind Closed Doors, not this so dark and with such an evil character. And it feels awful that I have to say that he was probably the most interesting character I've ever written, and my favourite in that sense, because it was fun writing him. So, you know, that kind of shocked me a little bit. But I should find him such an interesting character to write.
Were you worried about early readers, like the first time other people met Jack or read the book? Were you worried? I mean, it's fascinating to hear that he really just came out of you. Were you ever worried about people reading him and what they would think of you? I mean, that's a very personal question, but it's such an interesting to channel a voice like that and then put it in the world is fascinating.
Yeah, I mean, I didn't think about that until my daughters read it, and then they said, Mummy, how could you write such a dark book, and how could you have such a mind like that? And then my friends, when they eventually read it, because I hadn't told anybody, I'd had a book published at first, and my friends who know me as, you know, well, I'm just a very normal person, but they were really shocked that I could write something like that. But I quite like surprising people. It's quite good. You know, it's nice to give people surprise.
I think for me, in Like a Sister, I have a character named Erin who is kind of, so in the book, the main character is the first person narrator is named Lena, and she's estranged from her sister who ends up passing away. And after they have an estrangement, her sister becomes friends with this like rich white girl who's just kind of very like a fun person to write because she's just so clueless and privileged about like what's going on in reality and everything. And so she's also the only person who actually believes Lena when she says that she thinks there's more to her Desiree, her sister's death. And so it's funny because Lena kind of is jealous of Erin because of her relationship with her sister when she passes. She also kind of looks at her like, oh, this privileged, rich white girl, you know, but they end up becoming friends. And then she kind of realizes that Erin's not what she thinks. But it was just really fun to like write this character who's just kind of so like clueless about like the struggles of the world and everything. So. And
I mean, I think about Erin all the time, which maybe I don't know if I should be like admitting that, but I feel like you do this incredible thing with her character where she's both so sort of clueless about the world, but also there are certain things she really gets, like she gets how to sort of have power as like a young white woman, and she gets how to have power in the Instagram age, and she knows how to sort of manipulate people in a really interesting way. But like I think about all the time the scene where Lena has to teach her how to wash dishes, and she's like, we got to get this up to like a grease killing temperature, like she's going to wash dishes like cold water. And I don't know, there's just these great details where you're just like, who is this person? How did she make it in the world? And she's so different from your sort of world weary Lena, if you will. Yeah, so,
exactly. They're opposites. So,
and I think, you know, it's interesting that book, Like a Sister's, you know, written from Lena's perspective, it's in her voice, but you get such a strong sense of these other characters. I think you do a really great job of that, of sort of bringing forward other people as well. And I felt like this with Abby's book too, where it's like there's such a big cast of characters. You're really with one person's perspective, but you get a real sense of like the voices and the personalities that, you know, are happening around you. So I think we have a little bit longer to chat. And I want to remind everyone, if you have questions for the authors, do go ahead and put them. I think there's an ask a question button. So go ahead and throw them in there, and we'll turn toward your questions soon. I have more questions to keep us going, but I wondered if any of you had questions for one another. I don't, you know, want to hog the room if there's anything you guys have been like dying to talk about with each other's book.
Yeah, I'd just like to ask Kellye, do you have a sister, Kellye?
Do I have a sister?
Yeah.
I have two sisters, and I dedicated the book to both of them so they don't get mad at me.
I think it's great. You know, I love sister stories, and you know, somebody asked me if because I've got quite a lot of. Have I got sisters? I've got all my characters are females, but they just one of my questions was, you know, would I write sister books because I have 5 daughters, and I just think this relationship between sisters is just fascinating. So I don't think I'd write one about 5 though. It'd be really complicated. I'd have to do what Mary does and just write.
There you go.
My mom is one of 4 girls, so I kind of understand that sister dynamic and how you can love someone and hate. I think my dedication to my sisters is I love you even when I hate you, and I know the feeling's mutual, and that's how it is. Like, you hate each other but also you love each other. So
Very true.
Well, I wanted to ask for these twisty ones, and then you said that you don't even know how you get them twisted, but I can remember reading that when I read The Therapist, and I thought, oh my gosh, how do you come up with this? How did you get this twist? And I was thinking, could I ever do that? It's just so awesome to get these twists, and Mary, the story just didn't go anywhere where I thought it would go. And I am so good, so I think, figuring everything out, ahead of time. And I just could not figure it out. And I did not see these twists. And so that's what I wonder. It's like, how do you do that? So like, I just write just all over the place and just put things in. But is there like, do you write their story? Like you said, you write their stories first, but where do those twists come from? That's what
I wish I knew. I don't think of them until I put them on the page. I'm not a plotter or anything. So when I sit down in the morning, I always write in the morning. And when I sit down in the morning to write, I just literally have no idea what is going to happen in the lives of my characters. And I just, and I don't know, it's just, that I get an idea. And then I think that, maybe the next day I build on that idea and it gets twistier. And I don't really know how, things are going to overlap throughout all the storylines. So that's one of those things, once I kind of think of it, then I jump back into the storylines that I've already written and see like, how is this idea going to intersect with something in one of the other characters? It sounds like a hot mess whenever I start talking about the way that I write. But I think that there's just something so like organic and spontaneous about it. Like I love not knowing what's going to happen, and I love not knowing what that big twist is going to be until I think of it before I get there. Thank goodness, because otherwise I would be in like full panic mode if I was 3/4 of the way through the book and I had no idea how it was going to end. But sometimes I'm like halfway into the manuscript before I like fully figure it out. So there's like adrenaline and excitement that goes with it, a little bit of fear too that it's not going to come together. But I think that that's what just keeps me going and keeps me motivated.
Yeah. I love that. And it keeps us going as we're reading too. And Bernadette is, another of our twisty writers. Yeah. And you talk too about how pacing is so important to you. How do pacing and twists, how does all of that come to you as you're going through a story?
I don't know, the twists, I do think about what can happen, but really it just comes naturally. It's kind of quite an organic thing. Just when I'm writing, I'll just think of something and it'll fall into place and it'll just pull things together. And, I do
make this sound so easy. I'm just like, you're with taking notes.
It's not, I think it's quite easy to plant seeds of doubt about, in The Therapist, there were quite a few characters who I think could have been suspects, or probably everybody really. But, it's just planting those tiny little seeds just to make the readers think, okay, maybe it could be him or it could be her. And then, oh no, and they change their mind because something else happens and another little seed of doubt. So they start doubting themselves and thinking, well, we don't know who it is. And, but, I find that those little things quite easy to plant because it just has to be a sentence just put somewhere to make the reader think, oh, it might be him or her. But the bigger twists, yeah, they take a bit of work sometimes, the bigger ones, because especially the end, I can't talk about it, but the end one in The Therapist, the final twist, which I think people probably wouldn't have guessed. Not many people would have guessed that final one. So I was quite proud of that one. I can't use it ever again now, you see, that's the trouble. That's it, and you have to try and think of, I'm already thinking about my next book and the one after that and trying to come up with a twist that I haven't seen done before, or, just something really original. So yeah, it is. Yeah, it's not easy, but I enjoy doing it.
I was proud of you too for that twist. I was real proud.
I was going to say, I think that that's one of the things with all the brilliant crime writers that are coming to the genre and bringing so many amazing twists that the bar is constantly being raised, so high. Yeah. But I'm always, every time, somebody pulls up a brilliant twist like you, Bernadette, like all of you, I'm so impressed, so amazed. Yeah. Makes me, know I have to try harder and feel motivated to do so.
Right.
I know. And it's when you read somebody else's twist and you think, oh, damn, I wish I'd thought of that.
I know, it made me want to write a twisty book. So I've got one in my head. I just got to twist
That's
it all
great.
up. So
Good.
Oh, I love that. Yeah, I feel like my final maybe question then that we're talking about right now is, obviously writing for a genre and writing crime fiction, like there are a lot of expectations and like how much, and I think Bernadette, you talked a bit about thinking about the market as you're writing. And I'm just curious for, if there's more to say about what it's like to write when, readers are going to have a lot of expectations. Like they want to be entertained. They want to be surprised. They're going to be looking for every tiny thing that they can in the book. How much do you think about those outside reads or the expectations of readers of the genre? Or how much do you really, or do you have a sort of different process when you're diving into these very layered, twisty kinds of books?
I don't know. I do think about the reader. I do think, and I think readers are very, very clever because psychological thrillers are such a huge market now, and that's what people seem to enjoy reading the most. I think it is the biggest. I don't know if it's the biggest market, but probably. And I'm very aware that they read loads and loads of books, and they're very good at guessing. They're very good at knowing who it is. So, it's just trying to pull it off sometimes. So I am aware of my reader. I do think, as I said before, that the role is to entertain them. So, I do have them in mind and thinking, what can I do to make them surprised and to give them that, oh gosh, I didn't see that coming feeling. So I'm sure we're all the same, maybe. I don't know.
Well, I think about the reader and I think about the market. Well, luckily, I like to write in a popular genre because even though I think about that, so I thought about writing romance, which I know I could never do. And then I thought, well, maybe I could do rom-com. Then I figured out I can't do that either. So because I was thinking about the market, and I know those things are popular. And I thought, well, I'll give a try to that, to get readers to get, a book that will be published. But I just can't do those things. So I kind of stick with mystery. And so I think that I start out thinking maybe what would the reader like. But once I get into the book, I think it's like what I like. And I just hope that translates into what the reader like. And I think that it does. But it's like,
I think it does too. I'll cut it and say that.
I put, I'd like for this to happen, or what about if this happens? So it's kind of like me and what I like. But of course, you want to please your readers. And once you're done with writing what you want and, you pass it on, you have your fingers crossed and you're nervous because you want other people to like it. So I think for me, it's a juggle between the two. I start out one way, a transition to doing it for myself. And in the end, when I'm giving it out, then I want it to be for the reader.
I hope the ice cream flavors in your book were for you, because those were like incredible ice cream flavors.
So I am just a chocolate girl. I remember when I was little, is when Baskin Robbins first came out, and they would always have 31 flavors on thing, and we'd all go. I grew up with my nieces and nephews, so we'd all go. And they'd say, "You're having chocolate?" So then I did chocolate with almond. So I don't struggle to come up with the ice cream flavors. But if I had to choose, just give me chocolate. I'm a chocolate.
You've shocked me again.
I agree that it's kind of a balance between like writing for yourself and writing for the reader. It's, writing, it's so subjective. If I look at my reviews, the things that one reader loves, another hates, and vice versa. So it's kind of tricky, to know. But I think that if I feel incredibly excited about something that I'm writing, that hopefully that translates into something that the reader is going to be really excited to read. I think for me, I want a big twisty ending. I want characters that the readers will relate to on some level. And I want the reader to feel surprised but not manipulated at the end. Like those are kind of my goals when I go into it.
Yeah.
I think my first book in my series I wrote for me, the second one I was way more like cognizant of what this new standalone. I don't know because it doesn't come out till March and it hasn't been like on NetGalley yet or been reviewed yet. So I hope people like it. It's funny because I don't think it's twisty, maybe because I wrote it and so I knew the twists were coming. But like Helen says it's twisty. My mom thought it was twisty, you know? So it's funny when I like people like, oh, it's so twisty. And I'm like, really? It's twisty? Like really? You know? So I don't think I have like this big twist at the end. Maybe in the middle I do, but like not at the end. So I'm definitely curious to see what people think about it when they actually can read it. That's not my mom.
I mean, I was surprised by the ending. I will say I think the biggest twist comes in the middle, and
the big twist is mine's a big twist middle, the middle twist.
Yeah, but then you got to know where it's going to take you. So that's great. Well, I think we're going to go over to audience questions now. But this was just a joy. Thank you for answering all my sort of invasive questions.
You were great, Helen. Thank you so much, Helen.
Pleasure. And yeah, this has been great. So final questions, please put them in the ask a question box. And then I'm going to hand this over to Lauren, who will go through those. Thank you, guys.
Thank you. Bye.
Uh-oh, maybe.
You there? Wait, should I jump into the ask a question?
I think she commented, Helen, can you start having trouble joining?
Yes, happily. Let me take a look at these.
It's by votes too. You can see.
It's by votes. Wait, okay, just kidding. We'll start at the top. What are you currently reading? Anybody want to hop in?
Yeah, I'm currently reading Under Skeleton Lock and Key by Gigi Pondian. She's like an Anthony and Agatha award-winning cozy author who is going more to like more of a bigger place with St. Martin's, and it's really cool because it's about like a magician who is kind of disgraced, and she's a woman of color, and it's just really cool because Gigi's really good at locked room mysteries, and the mystery of this is that this woman, they find a body like in a wall that they think the wall has been there forever, and the body was just there. They don't know how this body got into the wall, and so it's just a really cool, fun book, and it comes out in March of 2022 as well. So.
Sounds so good. I'm reading Rock, Paper, Scissors by Ellis Feeny, which I want to say is out in September. And I'm only like maybe 60 pages in, but I'm totally hooked so far. It's about a husband and wife. Their marriage is kind of on the rocks. And they win a trip to to stay in like a chapel, but it's pretty abandoned. It's in a pretty remote location, and there's a horrible snowstorm coming in, and I'm not sure where it's going to go from here, but I'm totally fascinated and can't wait to see where it does.
Well, the last book I read was The Therapist, and it stuck with me. I still feel like I'm there. I'm in that book, but I'm also reading A Daily Bone to Pick by Peggy Rothschild. I'm a blurb, so it hasn't come out yet. I'm not quite sure when it's coming out. My editor just asked me to do a blurb, and I'm enjoying that. I enjoy cozies. I enjoy most mysteries, though. I don't just stick to cozies. So.
And am I allowed to say I'm not reading anything at the moment? Because I've just read your 3 books, and I'm actually having a little bit of a break from reading and writing at the moment because I've got a lot on this summer. And I just thought, well, if I do read, it'll be something other than psychological thrillers, but I haven't had a chance. It's so busy to pick up a book yet. So it's quite unusual for me, but I'm just having this space, not writing, not reading, but delighted to do things like this and meet other authors and chat to you all. But yeah, not reading anything, which is a terrible thing to say, but I think we all go through periods, don't we, when we're not reading, or do you always all read all the time, or I don't know.
It's hard for me. It's hard for me when I'm writing to read certain things. Like I kind of mimic what I'm reading. So if I'm reading bad writing, I write bad. So I have to like read really good people like you guys. I have to read you guys so I can be like, okay, I am in the mood to write well. But it's tricky. I think it's so tricky to balance writing and then reading and sometimes having to read for blurbs. And I kind of miss reading for fun sometimes. And so I make a point to read for fun. Like Gigi's book is just for fun.
Yeah.
You know, so.
Yeah. And I think sometimes you just need a mental break from all of it. And that's when I just watch way too much TV.
Oh, yeah, for sure.
Exactly. I don't even have time to do that, actually.
So I'm going to move down our question list. The next one was about juicy plot twists, but I think we talked a lot about those. So I'm going to go ahead and to this next question, which is, I'm so excited that we have 2 authors here who came into publishing, not in their early 20s, which seems to be this myth in publishing that all writers like come leaping out of their 20s. So the question says, I'll read it. There's a lot of chatter and trepidation in the writing world about women entering the writing world later, so after 40 or so. it's heartening to see two awesome published writers here over that invisible line. Can you all discuss the reality or myth of ageism, gender, race issues in publication?
Well, I didn't become traditionally published till I was 60 years old.
Wow.
So I don't think that age can stop you from doing whatever it is you want to do. And I don't remember anyone asking me how old I was when I didn't actually query for an agent. I got an agent or for publishing my first published book. Still, when they asked, you know, could she be my agent or could they publish my book? No one said, and how old are you? And even though I like to stick old people in there, this series has more of a millennial person in it. And I had one of my first self-published books did as well, a 28, 29-year-old person in that. So it doesn't matter. If you want to write a book, no one's going to ask you that. And as a past lawyer, if they do, you can sue them.
I think when you try and find an agent, nobody tells you. I mean, nobody says, you know, you don't. I never wrote how old I was. When I met my agent for the first time, she read my first 3 chapters, read the rest of my book, asked to meet me in London. She probably got a shock when she saw me. Maybe she thought she was going to meet a 30-year-old or something like that. But you know, you don't. It's actually the least ageist probably industry because they don't know how old you are when you write. So I don't think age is a barrier at all. Absolutely not. So,
just write a good story. Write your best story and go for it.
Yeah. Can I just say though, I think that there's definitely racist issues though. I think when I came out in 2017, it took over a year to sell my first book. And I always say this not to brag about myself, but my book had very little edits, and it's about a Black woman. And I mentioned the Agatha, the Anthony, the Lefty, the Ippy had 2-star reviews. And so the same book that I sold that got rejected by all these publishers is the same book that ended up getting all these reviews. And I just needed someone to take a chance on me. So I think it's really just been over the last couple of years that publishing has truly embraced diversity. Even like Walter Mosley can tell you a story about how they rejected his first Easy Rollins book, which was Gone Fishing, because they said Black people don't read. This is like 1988 in the late 80s, you know, so it's like it's all our lifetime. We were all alive, you know, and so I think I'm definitely curious to see what happens because I don't want it to be treated like a trend, because I'm always going to write Black women. You know, I'm sure Abby's always going to write Black women, you know, and so the idea that like you see my life as a trend is kind of upsetting to me. So I really hope that it becomes status quo, and I hope that publishers really put not just buy the books, but put their marketing muscle and their publicity muscle behind it as well.
Yeah, absolutely. I agree. You know, Kellye, so agree with you. I'm so grateful for and admiring of all the work that you have done. You know, founding Crime Writers of Color, being an advocate, helping writers enter the industry. And, you know, I am encouraged by, you know, I think I wish that things had come about sooner, and I wish I hadn't taken what it took last year. But I do think that there's really this overdue understanding. I'm seeing the word overdue in the comments, and I think that's really true. But just, you know, to understand the gatekeeping that was happening, and then to understand that readers want these stories and to have a chance to prove that point.
And that's why I appreciate Mulholland, because Mulholland had Walter and they have Attica Locke and they have Joe Day. Like they've been publishing people of color for years. It's not recent for them, which is why I was really excited to work with you guys. So
yeah.
So this is a great time to pitch my book. It's I edited this book, edited by moi, and it's 20 crime fiction short stories from authors of color. So it's a great diversity read, and
they're all in Crime Writers of Color.
We're all in, Crime Writers of Color. And they're really, really good stories. First one is by Tracy Clark. You read that one and you won't put the book down. So.
Abby, is that out now? Or when does that
Thank you. It's November 7th. I think that it comes out. It'll be out in November. So.
I can't wait. That was a much deserved shout out. Thank you.
I think Tracy's in the comments too.
I'm gonna go order my copy. This is fantastic. So I think Lauren is going to be available to take us over to see us out. If not, then I'll say something. But hopefully, Lauren, you're there. And thank you guys again.
Thank you.
Perfect. This has been such a joy.
I'm here. I'm back. Okay. It wouldn't be a good panel without one person with connectivity issues. My justification.
Or a dog or a cat or a child. So
yeah. So I just wanted, now that we're wrapping up, I want to thank everyone for attending. My co-moderator, Helen O'Hare, for her wonderful questions and insights and taking over that QA when I could not. Our partner, Murder by the Book, you can find their website in the comment section. Let me just put that in there. And most importantly, each and every single one of these authors, folks, their books are available in store. Kellye's book, Like a Sister, is on sale March 2022 from Mulholland. And if you love murder mysteries, she's got books available now too that you can read. Never fear. They're amazing. I definitely recommend you check them out. And again, thank you so much, all of you, for joining. I know it's very late where some of you are, and this was such a wonderful discussion. I hope everyone likes it as much as I did. It will be available for rewatching soon. And yeah, be sure to check out, of course, Novel Suspects, www.novelsuspects.com for more content and discussions like this. So thank you all.
Lauren, you did an amazing job. It was so well organized. So thank you so much.
Thank you.
I had a blast. Thank you.
Can't wait to see what you all come up with next. Bye, everyone. Good night.
Bye.
Bye, guys.